Hey, you. Thanks for tapping into some Untapped Keg podcast where we explore different perspectives, sobriety, and mental health so that we can take something, implement it into our own lives, and get to a thriving mindset. The place where we believe there's only one right way to sobriety, and that's the way that works for you. I'm RJ Zimmerman, and I am excited and honored to be joined by Coach Jamie Phillips. Coach Jamie is an alcohol freedom mindset coach certified through This Naked Mind, and also one of the founders of Pause the Pour and More. More on that later. How are you doing today, Jamie?
Hi, RJ. I'm doing great. So nice to see you.
It's great to see you too. You bring this sunshine. It's always every time that we talk, and honestly, even if we're not talking, we're in a big group setting, and you talk like it just smile comes
Oh,
to my face. So I really
oh,
appreciate that.
thank you so much. I love that.
Absolutely. Can you give us a little bit of your background before we get too deep into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like you said, I'm a certified coach through This Naked Mind, along with you and our fellow classmates. And I feel really lucky and really excited about that. And so I've launched my personal coaching business for one-on-one coaching, and in that space, I primarily focus on creative humans that are struggling with burnout and drinking to cope, and using a break from alcohol as a way to rest, repair, and not only recover from burnout, but eventually reignite that inner spark that can so often get dulled with chronic stress, burnout, just drinking in general. It can kind of dim our light. So that's kind of my focus for my one-on-one practice. And then, yeah, I've created this group platform with two other amazing coaches, and that's for intimate small group coaching in the space of alcohol and alcohol freedom. Um, Whatever that goal looks like for you. We're not preaching sobriety or total abstinence. Like, there's a whole spectrum of what you could want alcohol to look like in your life. So we support that. And we've got different programs for various people at different stages in that journey. So yeah, it's really exciting. All of this is really exciting. And I was trying to think of, okay, what's my story with alcohol? What's the short story? And because in hindsight now, looking back, with the clarity of mind that I have now, I mean, I can see that my entire life led up to all of the reasons why I was drinking ultimately. So like, the long story starts way back when I was a weird little kid, a quirky, creative, queer little kid in a small town, and didn't feel like I fit in, and so desperately wanted to fit in. But anyway, we don't have we don't have time for that story today. But if you fast forward a few decades, I ended up in a job that was incredibly stressful, and I was experiencing exhaustion and burnout already. And then the pandemic hit, and it was like the stress and anxiety, I mean, not only of just my job, but of life in general. There was this shared trauma that we all went through during that time that, I mean, it just cranked everything up to max. And I didn't have the tools to cope. Alcohol was my primary tool for everything at that point. Stress, a hard day at work, sad feelings, happy feelings, celebrating. Alcohol was my one tool for everything. So I was drinking to cope with stress during the pandemic, and knowing what I know now about what alcohol actually does in our bodies and minds, that was just like the worst thing that I could have done. But I didn't know. So that's part of why I'm so fired up. A huge part of why I've become a coach is because, I mean, I just want to shout this from the rooftops. And not from a place of judgment. I'm not judging anyone out there that's drinking. I just want people to know I just want people to have the big picture. I want them to have the information that I didn't have. I don't feel like in our society, I don't feel like we just have that information readily accessible for folks to make an informed decision about their drinking. So that's part of why I'm here.
And it's amazing how so many of us in our coaching cohort came together and had similar feelings where it's like there's not that judgment. You just want people to know.
Yes,
And, something that I've said before is like spotlighting choices you didn't know you had, because
yes,
that's like when it comes to non-alcoholic drinks, mocktails, alternative cocktails, all of that, you don't understand what is possible because so many people are like, as soon as they hear there's not alcohol, they just shut off.
yep,
And it's really interesting to see how all like so many of us are, it's not judgment. It's you can do what you want, just be healthy, right? And
yeah,
I think what this naked mind gave all of us is that phrase of your relationship with alcohol, because
yeah,
it's so key. And it that is perfect for if you don't drink at all. It's perfect for if you are drinking. What is your relationship to alcohol? And having those words that like they gave us is just, that's been one of the things that I've found so powerful, right?
right, right. Even just the framing of, because I feel like in this society, in the US and beyond, but this society, there's just sort of this assumption that alcohol is part of your life, our life. It's assumed that when you turn 21, you're going to go to the bars, and that means if you haven't already been drinking somehow before that, it's just it's an assumption. So even just framing it as a relationship, as this thing that you could even think about, um, I think even that is a slight mindset shift from the usual.
Oh, absolutely. And it like you said, you have the assumptions that are like placed onto you, right? Now, when you say relationship, all of a sudden it opens up to, oh, what could that be? I guess. And you're out of that box. You're out of the assumption, right? And that's powerful too, to realize that. I love how you put that. um, so as you have progressed from understanding that your relationship with alcohol was not where you wanted it to be, to joining this Naked Minds coaching cohort, what was a catalyst or something that helped you get to the place that you are now with alcohol?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, it's the science. I mean, I was lucky enough that a friend of mine sent me a link to the information within this Naked Mind, and that was my entry point. But once I got in there and I started learning the science of what alcohol does in our bodies and minds, in all human bodies and minds, um, some animals too, um, the neuroscience of habit change, understanding the mindset component of all of this, better understanding how it is that our minds are actually functioning in the background, the science of how we learn, the science of how habits are formed, why they're formed, and why they can be difficult to change. That all of the scientific angles just blew the roof off for me in all of this. And like I said, I was drinking alcohol to cope with stress, and not knowing that alcohol actually creates stress in our bodies and minds, that it actually triggers the release of hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, stress hormones. And so the irony of using alcohol to try to combat stress was like, it was just so ironic. I was creating more stress in my system than I realized. So the science unlocked this new opportunity for a new perspective. And it also allowed me to access some self-compassion in all of this that I definitely did not have access to before. I had this inner dialogue of judgment and blame and shame. And, I wasn't drinking. I wasn't drinking a ton, but I was drinking enough that I knew that it was damaging my health. I knew that it was impacting my life in negative ways. And part of my story also is that I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease in my 20s, and that's an autoimmune disease. And I was doing so many things in my life to avoid inflammation. I was trying to live this anti-inflammatory lifestyle. I was paying a ton of money for organic foods and fancy supplements, and I mean, not to mention doctor's appointments and all that stuff, but it was a huge focus of my life. And so again, in hindsight, the fact that I was drinking alcohol in addition to all of these healthy things I was trying to do, it was almost like they were canceling each other out, because alcohol creates inflammation in the body. It disrupts your gut microbiome. It disrupts your digestion. All these things that I can see in hindsight. But honestly, at the time, I didn't know that. So I just knew that I knew I was drinking too much, and I knew it was bad for me. And I also knew that I didn't really want to stop, or I had a hard time cutting back. And so I was waking up in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m. every night, with my heart pounding and my brain just like spiraling with anxiety and worry and judgment. And so again, just understanding the science behind all of these mechanisms, it helped me just get a little bit of space in between that inner dialogue of judgment and blame, to think like, well, maybe this isn't totally my fault. Maybe this is something that I'm not fallen. I can't think of the right word, but just it gave me a little bit of access to that what if, that I think is so important in all of this.
Absolutely. And not holding it against yourself for what you didn't know. Like that's the part that is
Yeah.
it's very difficult to tap into that at first. And when you start to learn the science and you start to really be able to look at the big picture, you allow yourself to, that's when things open up and you can start talking to yourself like you're a human being, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I can't remember where I was first talking to people about this, but we were talking about shame and putting shame onto habit changes, right? And what you mentioned earlier, like this is something that's really important. And when you add shame, and I'm going to be talking about myself here, to a 6'2" black hole pile of shame,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't add up to much because it just gets lost in everything else. So all that does is perpetuate the cycle of continuing to do it because you
Yeah.
feel as though this is all you deserve. And it's just confirmation that, yeah, this is what I deserve, to be stuck here and know that there's a change that I want to make. I just can't make it because I'm stuck here. So, what is a good approach for people who want to talk to somebody about making a change in their life, such as the relationship with alcohol, such as something that's stuck? Because
Yeah.
this is where the mental health and the sobriety component, like, they intersect with my world so much because it's very similar approaches that can be used across all of this in life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I think the key in that is finding the right person to connect with, because I think, there are so many different attitudes and opinions and perspectives out in the world. And I think, I mean, again, on the topic of alcohol, I am so thrilled to finally see the conversation starting to change. I mean, we've seen a number of like big high visibility news articles coming out about, the dangers of alcohol, or just about, just like thoughtful perspectives
The
on
truths.
drinking. The truth. Yeah. Yeah. But it's really so reassuring to see that conversation starting to change, because I feel like for so long there has been so much stigma attached. I mean, again, like that, because there's this standard belief by a lot of people in our society. It was a belief that I held before entering into this space that I didn't even necessarily, it's not that I believed it on purpose. It was just by the amount of exposure in our society to that basic, general, outdated now understanding that even just using language like having a problem with alcohol, or let alone terms like alcoholic, or the idea that you need to hit some kind of rock bottom before you make a change. um, all of that, I think for me, it became this internalized, that's where a lot of my judgment and shame came from. It was like this internalized, like, oh shit, I did something wrong. um I was supposed to drink responsibly, and I clearly didn't. I did something wrong, and now I've ended up in this position where I needed some support. I needed some help. I was really struggling with my stress, and I was spiraling into legitimate depression, which I didn't know how to recognize because I'd never experienced it before, but I needed some support, and the stigma held me back from talking about it openly. And I think that there is, again, part of why I'm here, part of why I'm a coach, is to do my part to change that conversation, to keep it moving in this direction of just being able to speak openly and plainly about all of this stuff. um, in the realm of addiction in general, there's a physical, biological component at play here that, again, it's not because there's something wrong with us, it's not because we're broken somehow, it's just because we're human, that we're experiencing some of these things. And being able to just talk about it like that with someone with the same perspective, even better, somebody that's actually been there and that understands what it feels like. I mean, that reaching out and finding someone that you can really trust to just talk about all this stuff with, I think can be just, I mean, life changing.
Yeah. And breaking it down into because we're human. That just, I got goosebumps just saying that, because we hold ourselves to a standard. A lot of us do, right? I think everybody does, but I
Yeah.
don't like to use, I don't like to use those, big all-inclusive terms, because everybody's journey is their own, right? That's what this is spotlighting. That's what this podcast is. That's what it's been from the beginning. And the simplest terms to break it down, because you're human. And as you say that, you just have this understanding that I can still have a standard for myself that is high, and reach this understanding that I'm not perfect in
Yeah.
every situation, right? I was making some videos yesterday, and here's a hint for something that's coming out in probably a couple of weeks, because I got so many in the chamber. But I was talking with a friend, and I brought up, oh, if I, go to the doctor and they tell me I have 5 years to live, like, I wouldn't even be sad. And he's like, well, that's, why wouldn't you be sad? I'm like, because I have a lot of time to enjoy things. So I calculated out the very bare minimum that you have. It's 1,825 days, 1,825 days. You have 1,825 opportunities to do different, right? To create joy in your life, to create joy for somebody else that you get to stand in and revel in. And also, you're human. So that 1,825 days, 30 of them, an entire month, is you're in a low spot. You're not living up to the standard that you're holding to yourself. That's 30 days out of 1,825. That's a hell of a good ratio, right? So when you break things down and you're able to kind of see, it can give you a perspective that it's, and this is the difference. It's not toxic positivity. It's not that just find the lesson, find the positive in everything. You have to. No, it's the understanding, right? That you are going to have days where you're not going to live up to this higher self and your best self. And it's all sliding. What your best self is how you are right now. I think, I think
Yeah.
that's really the rub, that you trying to, when people all of a sudden see that, it's just like, oh, I've been looking at this all wrong. And all of that to say, like, you have you have an opportunity when you recognize that you're human and you, as you said, talk to somebody who has been there, who can hold space for you, who can be understanding and just point out you're human. Of
Mhm.
course, things are not going to be perfect and you're not always going to act 100% perfect in every single situation. Um, it's really
Yeah,
powerful when you get to that point.
I I love that. I love what you just said. And I so feel that it's like there's an element, like a little bit of what I'm hearing you say. It's been so interesting for me in this journey is that I know in the past it's almost like I had this tightness about everything.
Hmm.
Like I was grasping at everything and just desperately seeking happiness,
Yes.
approval, acceptance.
Yes.
And so your point about even even no, even if you were handed, some kind of end point for this existence, it's like there is this sort of relaxing that happens. Like now that I've cleared my body and mind from that frenetic energy that alcohol creates, it's like I've got this peaceful anchor within myself that, I mean, it's everything that I was so desperately looking for before, I have now found. And it's by one change, by removing alcohol. And not that that's a simple change to make. Clearly, that's a layered process. But it's, I mean, again, in hindsight, it is just mind blowing to me to see the difference, to feel the difference on this side of it. It's like, it's so powerful. It's peaceful. I mean, that's what I want everybody to feel.
Right.
If I could take this out of my head and just, plunk it into everybody else's, I would, because it feels so good. It's so much better over here. It's like, yeah, life is not perfect. It's not all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. It's still life, and
Yeah.
life can hand you some shit sometimes, but there's this peacefulness, and there's like, even the hard stuff doesn't even necessarily feel as hard. um so yeah, I mean, life on this side is, it's just beautiful. And there's a poet that I really just love with all my heart. Their name is Andrea Gibson. And they just spin language into gold. And so now I'm afraid I'm going to misquote their words, but they were talking recently just about a perfect complement to what you were just saying, about thinking about life not so much in length, but in width, and in thinking about just how broad and how expansive we can be in every moment, in a single day, regardless of how many other days we have, just the width of experience that we can have in this moment. And it stuck with me. It's been sort of rolling around in my mind this week. So I love that you just said essentially the same thing.
And that is so true. I used to have, when you were talking about having, grasping, and it used to be that sand, the tighter you grasp, the quicker it falls through your fingers. And I would look at my life and I would say, where is the time going? Why is it
Yeah.
constantly speeding up? And I used to say, it's because of all the responsibility. It's because of every year you kind of feel 1 year less that you have, right? To make things happen. And now, with where I'm at right now, the things that I understand about myself, the things that I've accepted about myself, instead of looking at everything as now I have 1 year less, it's more, what what is it that I can do 10 minutes from now that I'm going to enjoy tomorrow when I look back? And having that frame of reference, and not being so focused on losing, but you're focused on creating, as you said earlier too. And it's just, that's it. Like, that's that's another one that it really starts to change things. And there's been so many things where I'm
Yeah.
like, if you do this one thing, you're gonna feel it. And it's like, yeah, that is true. Like, there's a lot of one things.
Yeah.
When it starts to all stack up, it's just that feeling of peace and serenity and contentedness. And you're like, this, I'm not necessarily happy. I'm just, I just know that I can handle things.
Yeah.
That's what the happiness that we've been striving for is.
Yes. And it's so ironic. Like, looking back is so ironic. And I do my best not to look back with that perspective of like, oh, I think it's easy to shift into that perspective of, I wish I had known this sooner, or I wish I
Yes,
had done this sooner. And I
absolutely.
feel like, I mean, that's just like a human thought to have. But I think that there really is truth, and this is going to sound really cliche, but there is truth to this, the thought that everything happens when it's supposed to happen. And again, and I know that even just those words coming out of my mouth, it's so cliche, but it's like, I know for me, I needed to learn certain lessons first before this kind of knowing, this kind of understanding was possible. Like, I needed to learn some of those lessons, and I needed to learn some of those lessons a couple of times over, turns
Yeah.
out. um which kind of sucks. But
Right.
but yeah, again, it's just like, it's just part of the process. And I'm so glad to be here right now. It's almost like I wouldn't trade any of the hard stuff in the past either, because I can see now that it's helped me get to where I am today. um
Absolutely. If somebody just tells you the lesson, but you don't understand why, because you haven't felt it, that lesson
yeah.
isn't going to mean anything to you. There's very few people that can take wisdom that is passed down and implement it without actually feeling why that lesson is what that lesson is. And
Yeah.
I've I've been there, because it's like, I know this. I know things that better. I know better than how I've been
Yeah.
acting. And I've still put myself in those situations, and it's, well, why? Well, just because I know better doesn't mean I can see and feel what that lesson is in that moment until I see and feel it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what alcohol, right? You mentioned it earlier where it was that all in one coping, all in one stress relief, all in one. And as humans, the want to simplify, but sometimes we simplify the wrong things too much.
Yeah.
That's that draw, that magic bullet. You just want it over.
Yeah.
And understanding that when you start, you have to start from where you are. You cannot start from where you wish you were.
Yes.
And when you are able to come to that, things just feel easier because now you
Yeah.
have that understanding that you're human and you can't start from a place that you've never been.
Yeah. I love that. And I mean, God, so again, that's a perspective that it's ironic again, based on the conversation we're having, that that's also something that I wish I could just gift to other
Yes.
people. Because I think that part of that again contributed to my internal, it was just fuel for my inner critic, you know,
Hmm.
way, way back, was feeling like I did know better in some ways and not necessarily having the capacity to do better at the time, and just judging the hell out of myself for that. It was this perpetuating cycle. So I think that that's another benefit of finding someone to support you in your own work, whether it's alcohol or beyond. But and again, whether it's a coach or a guide or even a close friend, like just finding someone to say all of this stuff out loud to can be really helpful, because some of this stuff, when we keep it in our own minds, it just loops and loops and loops, and it compounds. And we think we're thinking in complete sentences, but we're not. It's like these half complete thoughts. And it's real easy for, we've got some defaults in our brain based on survival mechanisms. And we've got that negative bias, the part of our brain that's trying to keep us safe, trying to keep us away from danger, that can default to a lot of not accidental negativity, but default negativity. um, and and just being able to say some of this stuff out loud to someone that can hold that space for you, and to say like, oh, actually, that's so normal, like I'm feeling that too. That's so understandable. Like, again, just helping you access that self-compassion and the clarity of what it is that you're even saying to yourself in the first place.
Yes. Is that where you have found the biggest benefit to coaching on your journey is having someone to talk and spitball and throw shit against the wall and see what sticks, and being able to sort through and ask you why do you think that people don't feel that way, or why do you think that you're alone with that?
Yeah.
That is.
100%. I think I'm experiencing now, even as a certified coach. I mean, the I have so many tools now. I can coach myself through a lot of things. I have the tools, I have the framework. I know what I can do if I'm having a hard moment or some hard emotions, or if I find myself in a thought loop or a thought spiral. I have the tools to do a lot of that work myself. But even now, with all the tools and the training that I have, there's a limit to the kind of work that you can do on your own. I think inherently, because there's a saying, what is it? That you can't see the label from inside the jar. It's like
Ooh, that's a
we
good one.
are, it's not a good one. Because inherently we are in our own minds, there's only so much that we can do within our own perspective. And to this day, when I'm working through something with a fellow coach, um, in saying things out loud, I will catch things, I will catch thoughts or perspectives or beliefs or, little hidden layers of judgment in what I am thinking in my own mind that I haven't caught before. And I've been journaling and thinking and processing, and there is such a power and a benefit in saying things out loud, because you not only you hear yourself, but like you said, the other person, especially if it's a coach or a guide or a counselor that's trained in that kind of intuitive listening, they can reflect back to you, hey, I heard you say this, do you want to dig into that a little bit deeper?
Mhm.
It's having a sounding board, but also a partner in listening, because some of these thoughts and beliefs that we have in there, like I said, they're spiraling and looping around so fast. Our brains are so powerful. I mean, we still know, the realm of science still knows so little about how the brain is actually functioning. I mean, it is incredible. And it's a machine. It's just firing away in there so fast that, again, it's just really hard for us to catch all of the little nuances. And I hear myself speaking about, these thoughts and the way that the mind is working, and I'm talking about the power of mindset in from a level of understanding that I did not have before I started this journey, and I definitely did not have back when I was drinking. And so that's partially why I'm so excited to have, not only my private coaching, but also this group coaching experience, because within both spaces, there's potential to have the conversations that you need to have in the early stages of your journey with alcohol. You're talking a lot about the substance. You're getting to understand all of those nuances, the physiological cycles that we've been talking about, the hormones, all that stuff. But once you get deep enough into that journey, and once you're able to get some space away from drinking, you start to access all of this other stuff that we're talking about. And it's so exciting to see people get to that point, and it's so exciting to have those conversations, because the potential for growth in this space is exponential. It's like alcohol is just the doorway. Any kind of coping mechanism, food, sugar, technology, overworking, all of anything that we're using to cope, anything that we're using to numb or escape. When you turn and face that is just a doorway into this deeper space, this deeper realm of clarity, understanding, peace, self-discovery, all of this incredible, powerful stuff that we're talking about. I just love that I get to have these conversations at all.
I absolutely agree with you, because a lot of these perspectives that I have, a lot of these, gems that people really like that I've simplified and had, they're on the shoulders of giants, as Isaac Newton said. I'm not doing this because I'm smart or intelligent or I'm anything more than what anybody listening to this is. It's these conversations where you say something that just clicks, jogs. You learn something. Like I have learned so much from Brene Brown. I've learned so much from even Annie Grace from This Naked Mind, you get this vocabulary that you start to talk to yourself with. You start to understand different things. And as you apply it to your own life and your own understanding, you can start to transform it to a way that works for you. And that allows you to come up with your own metaphors, your own definitions, your own ways of relating it. And that's going to resonate with some people. It's not going to hit other people. And that's okay,
Yeah.
because they'll find it on their own or they won't. And either way, that's theirs. And as you start to have these little epiphanies that add up, it's just um you life really becomes about, like I said, 10 minutes from now, hour from now. You don't wake up anymore saying, I can't wait till it's Saturday. I can't wait till it's the
Yeah.
weekend. It's, can I take 15 minutes out of today? 15 minutes, do something that allows me to feel good about me. That's all it that's all you need. And then you'll find more time than 15 minutes. Start with 5 minutes, start with 2 minutes.
Yeah.
It does feel uncomfortable at first. All of this feels uncomfortable and uneasy. And
Yeah.
honestly, you feel silly with quite a bit of it. But when you embrace that, oof, does it, you start to realize that silliness keeps you young.
Yeah, what I was just going to say was I have a if you could see the amount of post-it notes on my side of the fence here, you would laugh.
Me
I have
too. Me too.
yeah. So I've got a ton of post-it notes. And one of the ones that I have front and center that I look at every single day says, it's just a reminder. Oh, and it's a quote, maybe it's a Rumi quote. Anyway, it's just the concept that there is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path. And that reminds me every day that, like, I feel, I mean, again, in our society with the hustle and the grind, I think that we can so easily shift into this perspective of that I'll be happy when kind of thinking, like,
Yes.
when I get that job, I'll be happy, or when I lose 10 pounds, or when I get married, or when I, we have these goals and these mile markers that we think once we get there, then we will be happy or we'll feel a certain way. And while part of that is true, it's the process of getting there that holds the most potential. Like, our life is not happening in the future when we reach that goal. Our life is happening in this moment right now.
Yes.
And so finding that way, like you said, even if it's just 5 minutes or 2 minutes, whatever is accessible to you in any moment of any day, like, knowing that there could be an element of peace or play in your day. There could be an element of calm. There's all kinds of tools that we learn about regulating your nervous system, and there's the practice of gratitude and the neuroscience behind how that impacts your mind. And there's all these tricks and tools that we have now. But you're absolutely right that the key is, no matter what you're doing, it doesn't have to be an hour of exercise every day. It doesn't have to be a journaling practice where you sit down for 30 minutes every morning. I mean, that's not accessible to a lot of us, especially in the beginning of all of this. And so just finding those little windows of time. When I'm coaching people around burnout, there's a lot of conversations about this, about finding those little micro moments throughout the day that can just be for you. Closing your eyes and taking 3 deep breaths before you send the next email. It sounds like such a little thing, and it might feel kind of silly at first, But finding those little tools that work for yourself can slowly build up to make a really big difference in the long run.
It absolutely does. And one thing that I've learned that you just touched on too is our breathing, right? If you notice how you're breathing when you're really stressed out, and you can just shift it to those 3 deep breaths, it's incredible how fast your whole body just the feelings change. You reset, honestly, you reset.
Yeah.
Eh, What is one of your favorite tools to help somebody in a moment of in a really a moment of some overwhelm, a moment of you realize I'm starting to get to a point that I'm going to make a bad decision. I don't want to feel like this anymore. What is one of your favorite tools to use?
Yeah, I love that question. I There's two that I want to say, but the
Let's-
first one really that I feel like is the most accessible to people, in just like the pace of day-to-day life is, um, uh, literally just closing your eyes, putting your hands on your heart if you're not in a space where you would feel weird about doing that, and just taking one deep breath. I feel like, again, the pace of our day-to-day lives, we are all so busy, and our brains are firing at top speed. Our nervous system is reacting at top speed to everything that we're coming in contact with, everything that we're thinking and feeling. And so getting a little bit of space in between that thought and reaction, the feeling and reaction, it taking one breath with your eyes closed, and maybe even just asking yourself if you're safe in that moment, asking yourself a question can re-engage your conscious thinking mind. We've got the survival brain and the cognitive brain. And so if you're really feeling triggered, if you're really feeling like you're spiraling in overwhelm, closing your eyes, hands on heart, taking a breath, and asking yourself, am I safe in this moment? The act of kind of shutting yourself down like that, closing your eyes, shutting down the stimulation, and also asking yourself a question, it's calming the nervous system, and it's also re-engaging your conscious mind. And that can just, again, it can just provide you a little bit of space in between that trigger or that overwhelm and just boom reaction. Can give you a little bit of space to center yourself so that you can actually just respond.
What's the second one?
The second one
Yes.
is the second one is, have you heard Dr. Andrew Huberman talk about the physiological sigh?
Yes. So
It's
before, I think, was it you that brought it to the group about the sigh and how it resets, like our
Yeah,
coaching
maybe. I mean,
cohort?
I love that thing. I love talking about that. It
Yeah,
was
because I
probably
used
me.
to have these deep automatic sighs, and people would always ask me what's wrong. And what are you talking about? I didn't realize that it was something that other people didn't do. And when it was brought
Yeah.
up, I was like, oh, that's why I do that.
You knew you were
So
doing
let's
it
talk
before it
about
was
it.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's called the physiological sigh, and again, it's a tool, a nervous system regulation tool that is so easy to do. And this one you can do even, like, sometimes I do it when I'm on calls, like, speaking in public is hard for me, and I feel like it triggers my nervous system, and I get really nervous. My heart starts beating really fast. So you can do this even when other people are watching. And what it is it's an inhale, and then it's another quick inhale. So you're filling your lungs, and then you're kind of pushing it to fill even more. And then you're breathing out a long, slow exhale. And there's more like ways to do it if you want. There's more rules you can follow when you're doing it, but ultimately it's a breath in, another breath in, really long, slow exhale. And that kind of breathing that you were just sort of naturally doing in your life, we do that naturally. We do that when we are falling asleep. Animals do it too. It's like this, it really is a physiological, like automatic.
Yeah.
And if we do it on purpose, we can actually tap into that soothing mechanism. We tell our bodies we are safe right now. Inflating the lungs to that kind of capacity tells us inherently that we're safe. It also slows down our heart rate. So that's the second tool that I really like using as a default. And it's a favorite of my clients as well. Maybe that's chicken or the egg. I don't know. Like, I do talk about it all the time. So
And yeah, I love it. And it turns out I did it all the time because I was in fight or flight all the time. So
yeah. Oh,
as I've been able to bring my nervous system down, I don't do it often slash at all very much anymore. And it's
yeah.
like when you have that understanding, it's, oh, I can learn more from this. Like that's the doors that open up that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
How can people keep up with you, Jamie?
Thank you for asking, RJ. My website is jamiephillips.coach, and my Instagram is revolutionary alcohol reset, and there's some underscores in there. Revolutionary underscore alcohol underscore reset. Um, I have, yeah, I think those are the two main ways.
And
I was going to say my community space is the
yes,
website. The easiest access point to the community space is pausethepoorandmore.com. Just all the words spelled out. And honestly, if you find me in any of those ways, you can just reach out and I can give you more information about if you're interested in one-on-one coaching or even just resources or group coaching. I can point you in whatever direction feels best for you.
and for those of you that you can see now that if you book a free discovery call with Jamie, that in its own is going to provide you with some life-changing moments. We've been here for 50 minutes and you've already provided what, 3 or 4 tools that bring you back to yourself. And that is something that when you utilize, you don't understand how much it's going to help you. So go follow Jamie. It'll be in the show notes. Book that discovery call, have a conversation, and let her show you the power of having that perspective, having that accountability too. Because that's something that we downplay as well, is the accountability factor. But this episode has been powerful. It has been providing tips and tricks and just an amazing conversation. I want to thank you for braving your nerves and being courageous and booking this call because we talked about it last month and you did it. And I'm proud of you. And you absolutely crushed it. Absolutely crushed it. And I want to thank you. So this has been the Untapped Keg podcast where we look at different perspectives of sobriety, mental health, so you can take something and implement it into your own life. I'm RJ Zimmerman. Let's try to be better tomorrow than we were today, because at least if we don't make it, we tried. I love you.